All right, let's talk about Google's VO3. They just dropped 3 massive updates, and honestly, they're about to completely change the game for creators. So let's just jump right in. So, on September 8th, 2025, AI video generation just took this giant leap forward. Google pushed out a whole bunch of updates for its VO3 models, and the bottom line is they're now way more powerful, way more accessible, and actually ready for some serious professional work. Okay, so what's the first big update? And you could argue this is the most impactful one of all. It's the price. Google has slashed the cost, basically tearing down one of the biggest walls that was stopping people from making high-quality AI video. And listen, we're not talking about some little 10% off coupon here. The price for the main VO3 model, it's been cut by nearly half. That's a huge deal. It completely changes the math for anyone who wants to create a lot of video content. So let's really break down these numbers, right? The main model, it goes from 75 cents a second down to just 40 cents. And get this, if you're just trying to crank out ideas fast, the VO3 Fast model is now an unbelievable 15 cents per second. I mean, at prices like that, you can actually afford to experiment, to play around, and to do big projects. This opens the door for so many more people. Okay, but it's not just about making it cheaper. That's huge, but there's more. Google is also dropping 2 features into the toolkit that creators have been asking for, and these unlock a whole new world of creative options.
First up, and this is a big one for anyone making content for social media, Veil 3 can now create video in that vertical 9:16 format right out of the gate.
You know what that means, right? No more trying to awkwardly crop a wide video and cutting off half the action. Now you can just generate content that's perfectly formatted for TikTok, for Reels, for Shorts, from the get-go. It's a total time saver. And the second big creative upgrade? It's all about quality. VO3 can now pump out video in beautiful, crisp 1080p HD. This is honestly a massive step up for the model. We're talking about moving past those kind of grainy experimental clips we've all seen. This is professional-grade stuff now. With that much more detail, VO3 becomes a real, legitimate tool for filmmakers, for advertisers, anyone who needs that polished, final look. So look, new features are cool and all, but they're only as good as what people actually do with them, right? So let's take a look at how developers are already using these new tools in the real world. All right, first up is a company called Invisible Studio. They build an engine for short-form content, and they're saying that VO3 is so good at understanding what you ask for, at following the prompt, that it's become their go-to model. And for the people using their platform, that just means a huge boost in productivity. You get the shot you want way faster. Then you've got Saga. They're a platform for filmmakers, and what they're doing is pretty wild. They're using VO3 to totally flip the script on pre-production. They're helping creators go from just a little spark of an idea to a fully visualized concept, like incredibly fast. So instead of drawing storyboards for weeks, they use VO3 to create pre-visualizations, basically AI-generated rough cuts. This lets writers and directors pitch their ideas with actual high-quality visuals, and they can do it in minutes. I mean, just think about that for a second. A process that used to take weeks, sometimes months, can now be done in an afternoon. That's just an insane speed-up of the whole creative workflow. And finally, there's Mosaic. Now, they call themselves an agentic video editor, which sounds a bit techy, but what does that really mean? Well, think of it like having a super smart AI assistant, an agent, that's built right into your editing software. So you're not just cutting clips you already filmed. You can actually generate brand new clips right there on the fly inside your project. But here's the real magic, the breakthrough part. It's coherence. They use a feature called image to video, and that lets them keep everything consistent from one generated shot to the next. So you can build out a whole complete scene with audio that's up to 64 seconds long. That is a massive leap from the short, kind of random clips we're used to seeing from AI. Okay, so all of this is pretty exciting, right? And maybe you're sitting there thinking, how can I get my hands on this? Well, the good news is Google has made it pretty straightforward to get started. The key to all of this is something called the Gemini API. The simplest way to think about it is like, it's the front door. It's the gateway that lets developers hook up their own apps to all of Google's powerful AI models. And that includes everything we've been talking about with VO3. And the best part is, you don't have to start from a blank page. They've put together a ton of resources to help you out. There's the official documentation if you really want to dig deep. There's a starter app in Google AI Studio so you can just play around. And they even have what they call a VO Cookbook, which is just full of examples to get you inspired. Which really brings us to the final big picture thought here. For so long, making high-quality video was all about having a big budget, expensive gear, and tons of time. But now you have tools like VO3 that are just tearing down those barriers of cost and quality. So the question really isn't, can you create something amazing anymore? The question is, what will you create?